Brilliant. Okay, you've now got 99 seconds. Over to you.
Brilliant. So I just thought an interesting topic for all of the amazing creative brains on this conversation to have a think about is around how we judge success and how we measure success. So that's why I thought, is it really working? If the organisers could kindly go to the next slide. My premise was that we're so overwhelmed by so many different metrics. We have so many ways to reach our consumers today, so many different platforms, so many opportunities, so many types of content, all sorts of formats. And knowing if it's actually working or not, fundamentally, we find incredibly difficult. The brands that we work with want different things. The media agencies that we work with advise us on different things. And there's no sort of consistent way of understanding whether or not fans are genuinely enjoying what we're providing to them as a brand. So sort of the idea that I was wondering if we could solve one challenge, what would it be? If we go to the next slide, would be a universal benchmark for how a fan feels about something. And this would apply across platforms, whether it's TV, whether it's social media, whether it's digital, whether it's advertising, some sort of universal metric that could cut across the whole spectrum of marketing and content creation to help us better judge success.
Amazing. You did 99 seconds. Thank you so much. Let's go to some questions here. Remind everyone, at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A icon, that's where you type in your questions. So we've got a question here from Odin who asks, what's your view on how sport in general is going to develop over the next few months? I guess he's talking about what's happening with the lockdown, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a challenging time for sport. You know, one of the things that sport manages to do, perhaps more than anything, any form of medium, is capture a live audience. And one of the ways one of the reasons for that is the incredible atmosphere of live sports events, the presence of crowds, the feeling of being a fan in a stadium. And that's obviously not something that's possible at the moment. It was very interesting. I was watching the Premier League football last night, and the way that they were piping in crowd noise into the coverage to try and make it still feel the way that it would do. So it's clear that it's good for everyone for sport to get back on the agenda and to come back. And actually technology and content creation has an enormous role to play, and has had an enormous role to play during the lockdown in keeping that intention and engagement with sport during this period.
It's a question from Ian. I think it's very, very pertinent given what we're doing now, virtual event. Ian says, you know, we have seen eSports boom in the last few months, and events such as this one become almost as good as real world events, almost as good, I think. What do you think? So how can digital help drive and change the sporting experience?
Well, I mean, I think what the COVID crisis has done really is accelerate what was already taking place in the sports arena, which was pivoting to digital, sorry to use the jargon phrase, but for fans to have the opportunity to engage with the sport of their choice in the format of their choice, anytime, anywhere, and however they wanted to. And in the absence of real live sport, all sorts of sports properties have shown enormous creativity. I believe the Grand National had a bigger TV audience for their virtual Grand National than they have done in recent years, because it was innovative and it was creative and it was something that was on. So I think it's really important that as live sport comes back, all of the properties working in sport seize this opportunity to reach audiences in different ways. And for us at Wimbledon, we've got no Wimbledon tournament this year, but we've been working really hard on different ways to engage our fan base under the heading of Wimbledon Recreated, almost as a test to help us understand what we should do next year when there is a live event.
Brilliant. Really good question here from James. He says, tennis always seems to have had a better profile for its women players, maybe not the same money, compared to other sports. What can other sports learn about this from tennis?
Brilliant question, and great to have the spotlight shown on tennis as a positive example of what gender equality in the sport looks like. I think what other sports can learn is the power of having the best male and female players sharing the same stage at the same time. And that's something that we're very used to when you think about the Olympics. you see the men's 100 meters and then you see the women's 100 meters. They don't take place at different events at different times of the year. And that's what tennis has done really, really well. Combined events are more successful commercially than the separate men's and women's events. And that's definitely something that sport can learn from. Maybe one day we'll have a football World Cup where you have the men and women playing at the same time.
Excellent. Next question here from, it's a very interesting question, especially given the amazing work you've done at Wimbledon with IBM and all that sort of stuff to make the experience best using technology. So Tamara, hi Tamara, asks, do you think if the feeling, inverted commas, of the audience was showing to the players or sports people, would it affect their play and could it replace a real audience?
Feeling of the audience, interesting. So we've done some work with IBM to try and capture the most exciting points of a match based on crowd noise. So when the crowd was at its peak, therefore something particularly exciting was taking place in front of them. Now, if the players were somehow able to understand that the audience were particularly revved up and how that might change their performance. I mean, I guess you see it in sports where you have very clear home and away crowds, and you see the player with the home crowd taking that advantage and changing the way that they play and taking the momentum. So to have some way of acknowledging statistically how the crowd are feeling about performance, I think it's a fascinating idea. And definitely that relationship between the emotion of the fans, again, sports about emotion, and how the players are performing, I think would be a really interesting thing to dig into.
Excellent. Question here from James, who says, pretty broad, how are you using UGC? What's your view on UGC generally?
So, I mean, great question, James, and very topical. I mentioned Wimbledon Recreated, which is the campaign we're running for this year's fortnight, and that is solely dependent on UGC, and actually an amazing way of demonstrating the power of UGC, we think. So the premise behind Wimbledon Recreated is Wimbledon can't take place this year, but that doesn't mean that all of us collectively, all Wimbledon fans around the world, all the players, can't pay tribute to Wimbledon by recreating it in our own way. And what this also enables is to show off the breadth of our brand. So some people are recreating Wimbledon by playing tennis in their garden, but some people are recreating it by having strawberries and cream. Some people are dressing up their kids as the umpire at the kitchen table. Some people are paying more attention to their lawn, whatever it might be. And again, to use the word emotion, the emotional connection our fans have with our event is one of the things that makes it strong. So to show how they feel about it in their own words, through their own content, is very powerful.
Excellent. Question here from Luke, a very interesting question. He says, given Wimbledon Centre Court tends to host white middle-class people, is digital for Wimbledon as much about engaging a new audience as much about engaging those who already attend?
Yes, I mean, when we launched our digital strategy, we took a bit of a different course from most sports properties for whom digital tended to be very focused on selling tickets and marketing the event and getting people to come. Whereas for us, our digital platforms were all about being the next best thing to being at Wimbledon. So recognizing that demand for tickets is really high and that supply is scarce, how could we bring to life the feeling of being at Wimbledon through digital? I would say that the Wimbledon remains one of the few events where anyone can get a ticket to Centre Court. You do have to queue, but the front few rows of the court are full of all sorts of people, not just those you might expect. But absolutely, democratizing Wimbledon, making it accessible to everyone, digital, social media, content, all of those things have a really, really valuable role to play.
Perfect. The question, I think, to be the last question looking at time. Jamal says, I've had my content budget slashed. What are the best low-budget creative tactics you've seen?
So I would always say the best money you could ever spend is on really good people. If you could get somebody who understands social media, who is, reasonably accomplished at graphics and video editing, then that's all you need. You don't need to be hiring really expensive production agencies. Apologies to any agencies on the call, they're brilliant. But if you are struggling with budget, having people and focusing on that would always, for me, be the first place to start.
Amazing. Alex, that's time up. Thank you so much, and congratulations on the new baby.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.